Welcome by Talking Out Cloud. My name is Danny and I'm leading the international activities at Intercept. And today we'll talk about cloud native. With me in the studio is Arian Geertsema, Head of DevOps. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh,
it's a
nice
pleasure
being
having
here.
you. Yeah, definitely. We seem to be lucky because it's really, really hot outside and it seems to be very cool here. So.
Oh, that's nice.
Hey, before we start with cloud native, can you do a brief introduction about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I have a background in software development, software architecture, and moved 2 years ago to Intercept and started in the software development department as well. And since the 1st of January this year, started my new position as Head of DevOps, and in that capacity kind of helping our teams, helping our customers. So I oversee all our technical teams and help them to serve our customers, whether that's related to the managed service offerings we have or whether it's related to software development as well.
Cool. Sounds great.
I love it.
Of course you do. Otherwise you wouldn't be there.
Yep.
Hey, and then cloud native is right. I think maybe kind of a buzzword, or maybe it's something everybody's relating to. But definitely it's involved in your work. So at least if I kind of describe cloud native, it refers to an application designed to reside in the cloud from the start. And it involves probably some technologies like microservices and maybe container orchestration, auto-scaling, etc. But maybe before we start like kind of peeling off this kind of definition. So what's your definition of cloud native?
So to me, cloud native is more like a journey. So you said something about starting in the cloud with a new application. I think most applications that actually move to the cloud are existing applications. And when you start out in the cloud, you might start out as cloud hosted, which is perfectly fine because the cloud have many benefits for cloud hosted applications as well. At the same time, moving on this journey of becoming more and more cloud native is kind of about taking advantage of this cloud and the opportunities of the cloud. So the more cloud native your application is, the more you actually benefit from what the cloud offers you or can offer you. But like I said, that's a journey. So that's not something that at a certain point in time you have achieved or whatever. No, and there's not a right way to start necessarily. We will probably talk about steps that you can take on this cloud native journey. And also the way or the amount you, so to say, will be cloud native can differ as well, because that has to do with your business needs as well. Yeah. You talked about scalability. Well, some software products really have a elastic, scalable necessity. Some others don't. Well, then it kind of based on those business requirements, whether or not you continue on your cloud journey, if it comes to scalability, et cetera, et cetera. Although some things you could say, we will probably talk about observability, for instance. Yeah, well, every application in the cloud needs some form of observability. So there are some common themes that I would say for every application running in the cloud or every software vending, having an application in the cloud is definitely applies. And at the same time, well, some depend on your business requirements and your particular branch of software you're in.
Yeah. So if I have, for example, if I understand you correctly, so if I have an application that has been maybe designed from an on-premise situation, but then involving it in cloud technology, involving cloud tools, and then make it public on the cloud, then I'm having a cloud native application, right?
Well, at least you start with your cloud native journey, yeah. Yes. And where you are on that journey, well, that is something to be debatable, but at least you start there. And I would say, especially with migration scenarios, you see a lot of companies starting out as cloud hosted. So they move their on-premise application to the cloud. If you start new, maybe with a part of your application or even with a whole new application, well, you can start off cloud native as well. So there are some ways in your infrastructure design, in your software design, because you can design in a cloud native way from the start on, which means you can really benefit from the cloud right from the start of your application development.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Hey, you touched just upon a point which you mentioned, like it's an infrastructure application approach. So really interesting to understand your opinion about it. What is it? Is it an infrastructure or is it an application approach?
Well, that's what I love about cloud native. I think it's both. So there are definitely infrastructure aspects there at play. Choosing which compute resources you use in the cloud, which data sources you use in the cloud is definitely an infrastructure decision. At the same time, software architecture is always involved because the actual software you build running on this infrastructure needs to be cloud native as well and needs to, for instance, scale, where we just talked about. If you have a stateful application, it will be harder to scale. So you need the software architecture as well to be able to scale in a horizontal manner. I just spoke with some students from the University of Applied Science Windesheim here in Zwolle, and we were talking about database design and horizontal scalability. Well, I've worked with databases running on machines with 64 cores with 500 plus gigabytes of RAM. Well, it scales fantastic horizontally. But if we're talking about cloud native, and I just briefly touched on this topic with them, well, we ideally would scale vertically. Well, that means something for your application. That means something for your data design. So it's definitely a software architecture problem as well as an infrastructure problem. So I think, and that's what we see with Intercept, both disciplines comes together in helping our customers become more and more cloud native in their application. Yeah. And that's what I love about it.
Now, you just mentioned two things, so vertical and horizontal scaling. Just to remind me, I assume that horizontal scaling means that I'm just applying more machines in a horizontal way of having having more capacity.
Yeah.
So what does it mean when I'm scaling vertically?
Just put more RAM, more CPU, gotcha. more hard disk into one machine. Gotcha. And I mean, still in Azure, we can buy machines of like 40,000 euros a month. And you can run your application just fine on that. It will probably be a performant application as well. But yeah, scalability is kind of limited to the set of hardware.
Yeah, gotcha. Cool. Hey, and you also mentioned some benefits. So auto scaling, of course. So what kind of benefits can you more describe when talking about cloud native?
So there are basically kind of two types of benefits, I would say. So one is more like business related. So then we're talking about not only applying modern ways of building in the cloud, but also modern ways of building your software development. And you're talking about the increased frequency of releasing software in the hands of your customers. We're talking about continuous integration, continuous deliveries, all these modern software development approaches you will take. In the end, it's also about being cost effective in the cloud. If we talk about scalability again, if a resource is underutilized, well, why not scale it down? Why not, pay less for less resources you use in the cloud? Especially if you have a SaaS application, if you could combine all those resources all your customers use and then kind of scale based on demand, you can really have a cost advantage there of building a cloud native application. We know certain applications that just once in a month they're really, really busy, and then the rest of the month, well, it's not so busy anymore. So we can scale down the resources. If you can do it in an automated way, or you can even do it on demand based on just customers or visiting your website, using your application, well, that will be ideal. At the same time, it also has to do with where do you want to focus as a company? Because the more and more cloud services you use, well, it might be costly. It might increase your cloud bill. At the same time, it might save you from having to use scarce resources within your IT departments on, I don't know, building your own observability infrastructure or managing configuration in the cloud. So it is also allowing you to choose whether or not you want to use a particular cloud service. And if you want to, yes, your cloud bill will increase. But at the same time, you have more resources that you can spend on building your own application and building all the business intelligence you have in your application. Yeah. So the cloud and being cloud native is also about having choice of adopting these cloud services to your benefit, or saying, well, I'm going more for the cost effective way and I want to use as less resources as possible, or a combination of the two.
Yeah.
So I think it's partly about having choice. That's what the cloud actually offers.
Yeah. So can you even make this maybe more, let's say, imaginable? As in, do you have a use case for this one? So we can actually make it more feasible for ourselves to understand?
Well, I just mentioned we spoke with a software company that the intensity of what they utilize within Azure is on a monthly basis. They handle a large amount of data just once a month. They just scale up once during that month, have additional resources. I mean, they pay more as well. And after they processed all the data and all the data is available to their customers, well, they will scale down their resources again, and that will be more cost effective. That same customer, by the way, moved his configuration, an entirely different topic, into a Azure service called Azure App Configuration. So all our cloud providers have different services you can utilize. In this case, App Configuration is an ideal resource for having your configuration outside of your application, making it easy to, in this whole continuous delivery notion, release your application more often, have control about your configuration, maybe use configuration as code. And by having more control, they can release more frequently and with more confidence. That's a way of utilizing actually more cloud resources, but at the same time freeing up their development capacity to actually build their software instead of building some kind of configuration mechanism, which is necessary, but not really their core business.
Yeah, I understand.
I think that would be a nice example of kind of where you can see this cloud native. And like I said at the beginning, I mean, it's a journey, so you can kind of pick and choose which elements of this journey or which services in the cloud appeal to you or might solve an issue you're running into as a company, and kind of move your application forward in this journey.
Yeah, exactly. I totally understand. So I guess a journey never goes in a straight line. So it goes with ups and downs. So what are the most common, or what have you seen are like interesting or obvious pitfalls we can avoid?
Yeah, so one example we've encountered a lot and where we help our customers with as well is observability. Because if you move to the cloud, all of a sudden you might not have access to all the log files you used to have before. Or you're actually moving into more of a microservice way of architecting your application, and all of a sudden, instead of there's one application, all of a sudden there are 30 applications working together, solving that same problem. Well, if something goes wrong, how quickly can you pinpoint where it went wrong, what happened, which message might be faulted, which application actually had a restart and therefore couldn't handle a request? So having this observability, knowing what's happening in your application and when something went wrong, kind of easily pinpoint where the cause of that exception was or where the cause of that bug was. That's super important and might be hard if you move into this cloud native journey and say, hey, I'm going to leverage a microservice architecture. So that would definitely be something that can actually be harder if you do not solve it properly when going on the cloud native journey.
Yeah, that's helpful, definitely. Let's observe that. I can imagine, right? If you had 30 applications running on the same task or workload, that creates, at least in my mind, it creates a kind of a mess. So,
and the reasons for doing so might be perfectly fallible. I mean, it might be more scalable. It might be fault tolerant. So, exactly. But I mean, you have to build your applications with these type of concepts in mind. I mean, if we have 30 applications, and most of our applications nowadays connect with outside services as well, they have to be fault tolerant. So you have to envision, okay, it might be that one of these services is not available. What will happen? Did I actually architect my application for not being available? Do I know what happens then? And there again, based on, you mentioned it before, is it an infrastructure or software development question? Well, it depends. If we're looking at certain queues in a cloud might have particular benefits, might have particular SKUs. So we need to pick and choose a SKU that will actually fit with our software architecture. Yeah. If there's a misfit between the two of them, we might all of a sudden lose messages. Well, that's not acceptable probably. So we really have to think from an infrastructure perspective and see what's possible within the infrastructure, because more and more cloud services become more and more intelligent. So we can actually spend less time in our application, worry about stuff, because the infrastructure will solve something. At the same time, as a software architect, you need to know what the infrastructure actually solves for you and what you still have to solve in your application. So that's always an interesting dynamic of taking advantage of the cloud and at the same time, know for sure what the cloud will actually offer you and what not as well.
Yeah, interesting. And then talking about infrastructure. So I mentioned at the beginning containers orchestration. So how is containers or AKS related? And I see you laughing already.
Yeah.
Related to
I know we love talking about AKS and for good reason. So at Intercept and so that's good. And yes. Having a microservice architecture, having a SaaS application, I mean, AKS and all these container orchestrators, they can definitely help you out there. And you see all the cloud providers providing more and more capabilities there for software development companies out there. So I definitely see AKS is definitely a part there. Containers, obviously, also with the ease of moving your application from a development or test environment to your production environment there as well. It kind of becoming ubiquitous these days, although we still see some customers running on a VM being configured by hand. So there. At the same time, I wouldn't say AKS is necessarily cloud native, because if you deploy your AKS cluster by hand and not adhering to the principle of immutable infrastructure and infrastructure as code, I mean, that's not really cloud native, even though it's AKS. Yeah. The same is true for your deployment pipeline. If you deploy by hand to an AKS cluster, although I'm not even sure if that's possible, it's still not really a cloud native way of utilizing the cloud. But is there an important role to play for the AKS-like services? Yes, definitely. And containers, I mean, they're here to stay, definitely. And you see things like service meshes kind of helping ease the pain of having a microservice architecture. I always say I love the monoliths, a majestic monolith, properly modularized. But if you have to, yes, please go on this microservice route, because there are advantages. At the same time, there are some initial costs as well associated to microservices. So do think about it carefully. And there again, there comes this concept of a software architect and an infra architect need to work together to actually, determine the best architecture for a software product running in the cloud.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks. And because you're obviously leading a DevOps team, because you're head of DevOps. With Joop and Rini in the first episode, we also talked about culture and the different kind of skills, people, and knowledge we have in the company. So related to your team, so how do you secure your knowledge and skills when your team so actually serve that cloud native approach to the end customers?
Yes, I already mentioned cloud native is about infrastructure and software architects and software development working together there. And you see that in this whole modern DevOps approach as well, where, I mean, the word obviously is mentioning both disciplines. And we see that in Intercept as well. So a modern way of managing your cloud service involves all kind of discipline that we used to know from software development, all the automation, all the pipelines. That's definitely something where you see that software development is ahead of what infrastructure used to be doing. And that's what we see as Intercept. So we actually so glad that we have both disciplines within the company. So you see that people from software development help out with building these complicated pipelines, building out the way of really fully automating your infrastructure deployment. At the same time, we need the knowledge of our infrastructure specialists to really know what the infrastructure can bring to your application and where you as an application architect do not longer have to be concerned about. We talked about configuration, for instance, where you can use the service for. We talked about observability. The same is true with a lot of data stores. Which type of Azure SQL or document databases might you be using? So that's something where both disciplines help out as well. And we see that with customers as well. I mean, as Intercept, we focus mostly on software companies or companies that actually see software as an advantage in their business. That means that having the knowledge of how you build software, having the rhythms like the sprints, actually help us adjust to the way our customers work and kind of work in the same rhythms as well there.
Got it.
That's good.
Definitely. So then,
so maybe a question is for you, if I want to. So you talk a lot with customers. You say, do they mention this word cloud native as well? Is this something that's on top of their mind as well?
So that's an interesting question. I guess it depends a bit on the conversation I'm having with my customers, right? So if I'm positioning Intercept, I probably never. I name cloud native, but then again, so what does it really mean, right? So I'm not sure if everybody interpreted the word or the two words actually the same. So I always try to describe what it entails from my position and my perspective, and then understand like, hey, are you working with software development? Probably yes, because again, Intercept is focusing on software development companies. And then understanding, okay, what is actually your need you have? And that trying to translate into, the services we can offer. But specifically to your question, so do I mention cloud native? Yeah, I do. But then again, so I'm not sure if we're speaking the same language when I'm talking to my end customers. Yeah, maybe also depending on who I'm talking to. But then, yeah.
Fair, of course.
Most of the time it's technical people. But yeah.
Yeah, but at Intercept, we mostly help companies with an existing software application. I mean, if they start something new, we can definitely help them out, really make sure that they start out as a cloud-native application, and we can advise and guide them there as well. But a lot of our customers do have an existing application. I mean, they do have some offering. And what I always note, they bring, or they already brought a couple of years ago their application to the cloud, and they're always kind of looking at how can I now really benefit from the cloud? And of course, the cloud benefits you in allowing you to easily test things out, to easily scale up, scale down. That's definitely something that we would kind of from the start on. But really taking advantage and leveraging the new cloud services, I think most of them always struggle. To what extent can the cloud help me any further, especially in a time of scarce resources? I mean, we're all looking for the best IT talent. We do as well. So please work with Intercept, because we need more people as well. And that's good. But at the same time, if you focus as a company, you can focus on really your business problems you want to solve and the ideas you have for your particular market, for your software, and leverage the cloud even more, because there are services that can just make it easier for you to develop your application. I think that's super interesting. Yeah. And we in Intercept are positioned really well to know all these services, know how they are being applied in practice, and can guide you in, we think this and this can actually help you achieve a greater business agility, because that's in the end what you as a company would like. I mean, it's lovely to have an AKS cluster. I love them as well. It's lovely to have a scalable, serverless function as well. But at the same time, we're here to solve business problems as much as possible. Yeah.
So then you're talking to many customers as well, right? Maybe from a different angle than I am. Can you point out, if it's possible, right? If there is a market trend or a specific customer request or questions that is like most common, that you see like, hey, this is really obvious because everybody's working on scalability or implementation of?
Well, I would say, coming back to what I mentioned earlier, it kind of depends on your business as well. So kind of knowing your business and knowing the demand there, that helps you first to identify, where can I, on this cloud native journey, actually, what are the right exits for me to take, or what's the right direction for me? So I would always say, start there. Really think about, what do I need within my application? At the same time, cost efficiency is definitely something that's on top of everybody's mind, and I would say the more cloud native you run, the more cost effectively you mostly run as well. Another one, a topic that I really see coming up is sustainability. And there's kind of this interesting approach that most cloud vendors nowadays start sharing some of the CO2 that is involved in running your cloud and running your software. Early days, I would say. I would definitely expect us to see more of this coming there as well. But being more cloud native mostly mean as well that you are more sustainable in the way you run your software as well. So this is kind of a whole different angle, but I would say might spur a further interest about being cloud native as well, because it's also about, the more high level cloud services you adopt, these cloud vendors will actually optimize the way these services run. Hidden away from us as Intercept, hidden away from our customers, but they optimize that as well, meaning it will be more run in a more sustainable way. So I would say this whole sustainability discussion is a discussion we will have in the coming years even more, and I think the whole cloud native team fits there perfectly as well.
Yeah, when I was talking to Wesley the other day, so in my last podcast as well, he mentioned exactly the same answer.
Okay.
The big vendors have a way, let's say, more scalable approach on sustainability.
Well, you were talking with him about AI and running AI. That's a perfect way of running stuff in a cloud native thing as well. And he might already spoke about it. I actually didn't listen yet to his podcast. But if you, for instance, train a model, you could definitely do that in a cloud native. You want to scale to a massive amount of resources, train your model, and if once your model is trained, you scale back, and you only paid for those resources that will actually used when training your model. That's a perfect kind of cloud native way of solving a problem in the cloud.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense.
And by the way, sustainable as well, because if you have those resources being idle there all the time, that's just a waste of resources, literally. Which is not really sustainable.
So what are you most proud of?
Well, I was thinking about it. I think the first encounter I had, and that was in my case with the Azure cloud, was 15 years ago. And then, the amount of cloud offerings, those are pretty limited. And even though it was still revolutionary compared to what we did on-premise and what we could do on-premise. Again, also had to do with cloud native, us as a development team no longer having to care about an on-premise server or even an on-premise virtual machine, but all of a sudden these cloud services are there to help us out. If you see where the cloud is now and the broad set, and broad is doesn't even start to describing of services that are now available, making it so easy to build a cloud native application, especially if you start over, but also for existing applications. It's just a super interesting time to actually build an application, whether you want to integrate search, whether you want to build it, which we didn't even discuss yet, but if you want to distribute it globally or regionally, if you want to have a fault tolerant setup, which you can kind of move to a different region within Azure or within AWS. There are so many opportunities now to actually build a worldwide cloud native application. AI, not to mention. So the ease in which you now can incorporate AI into your application. That was undoable in the kind of the early days of this cloud. And now you have so many services you can kind of pick and choose to actually enrich your application, which is fairly easy to do. So if I'm proud that, okay, these are all the capabilities that are available to us. And we as Intercept, we help our customers kind of navigate not only on their cloud native journey, but also, okay, which services are now beneficial for your applications, of which services you might not have thought about, might be interesting for you to incorporate as well. And it's just super interesting time because the amount of services only increase. So that means a lot for our interceptors to kind of know all these services and know how to apply them. And at the same time, being able to really engage with the strategic discussions with our customers. Okay, how will you move forward with your application and which services can actually be beneficial there as well?
Yeah. Cool.
So proud kind of to navigate in this complex world of cloud services nowadays, combined in this complex world of having an existing application with all the legacy that's always involved there, and kind of how to move forward. Love those challenges, and at the same time proud we can actually be a guide there.
So obviously you love technology. So what would be interesting for our listeners to look into? As in a next step, or maybe this is like the holy grail, or this really excites me, so look into.
Well, we talked a bit about AKS, microservices, and one of the interesting tool sets, you might say, that's happening there is Dapper. It's called a distributed application runtime, and it's a set of APIs that helps you build microservices more easily. You can actually connect your application to your micro applications to this Dapper runtime, and it will help you solve some of the common problems you will have. And the interesting thing there as well is we recently did a hackathon within Intercept, and one of the developers used Dapper to migrate his application from Azure to AWS.
Okay.
And he was actually able to do so within 2 hours. And that was partly because Dapper abstracted away so much of the cloud-specific ways of working with message bus, working with caching, working with data storage, that he was able to, within 2 hours, move his, fairly easy application, but still, to another cloud and just have it running again with all this complex architecture and this microservice architecture. And I was just like super impressed. But also, so these tools nowadays that help you in the complex world of microservices, build applications faster, and at the same time, just like I mentioned before, focus on your business problem and not focus on all the common stuff like how applications talk to each other and how to do caching in an efficient way, etc., etc. But really abstract that away for you. And in the end, even maybe allow you to have a multi-cloud strategy without really having the need to adjust your application. I know it's not always completely true, but at least it kind of brings these possibilities further. So I would say Dapper will be definitely an interesting thing to kind of look into as a software development company. Also because you can slowly adopt it. So there's not a necessity to kind of have a big bang architectural change to adopt Dapper. You can start with your first application, then your second application. So you can kind of slowly move and adopt this Dapper. Maybe your new applications. So yeah, definitely something that's super interesting to follow. And we're following it with interest as well within Intercept.
I appreciate it, thanks. Hey, and then maybe a final question, at least from my side. Maybe you have more questions to me, I'm not sure. So what has been the, I'm not sure how to actually say this, but as in this most scariest or mind-blowing or maybe the most funniest story you can share related to Cloud Native, obviously. So, for example, a customer case where you actually did something and then it like packed out totally the wrong way or the opposite way, or things happened.
So one of the things there's always a challenge in building scalable applications. And even though you have your infrastructure architect with you, and even though you have your software architect, and they really work nice together, which sometimes happens and sometimes not. But actually seeing a architecture for a new application handling just an enormous amount of requests and a lot of messages going in between those applications, and actually witness that for the first time, it always kind of fills me with joy to say, okay, we built something, we tested something, we might even did some load testing. And we saw that recently with a customer as well, where they went into production. We helped them build an Azure integration services, which integrated a lot of their applications. And having that eventually run into production and actually see this enormous production load of data and still, the cloud native application being built there holds, performed well.
Cool.
Observability was in order, so if something went wrong, we can definitely trace it through all the applications and messages being sent there. That's kind of like, yes, we did it moment. And I think that was partly because in this case we were able to build in a cloud native way from the start on. Definitely have this infrastructure and software architects working together, having the observability in order, building a fault-tolerant system as well, because we were integrating with, it was an integration service, so we integrated with a lot of different applications. And it all worked out. I still kind of, when this first production load comes through, there's always this moment of tension, and if it works, of real joy, like, yeah, it worked.
Cool. Yeah, really impressive.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I would like to end, unless you have any further questions to me.
No, I'm done. Thank you. Thank you for hosting me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for being here. In our next episode, we will talk about cloud control, which is a service of Intercept, but we will not talk about what it actually is. So we partly talk about what it actually means, but at the same time, we'll actually explain what's the benefit of using an MSP as your partner. So if you're interested, listen to that one as well. Arian, thank you for being here. It has been a pleasure. Thanks.
Cheers.